Yeah, definitely use the shortcuts. They're also available to you on the actual day of the MCAT. So use like those keyboard shortcuts to highlight and strike out anything. Those are really helpful. You also have your marker and whiteboard sheet to write on. If you want to write those mini notes of paragraph summaries that we've been talking about, if those work for you, you can definitely do that on the test day as well. Is there a certain type of passages you guys are still struggling on? So basically, this is a time to bring up any cars questions so we can try to help you out with those strategies before we begin our passage breakdown. Okay, if no one has anything else to add, we can start the passage. Yep. Okay. Do you mean like historical passages are kind of difficult to understand? If it's,
Yes,
yeah, go
because
ahead.
I think usually they are very dense with information, and sometimes the timeline can there will be a lot of people say something and with a lot of days. And also I'm not very good with history either.
Yeah, so for those dense type of passages, I think it's really helpful to read the questions first because then you know, like, oh, is this going to show up later? Then you know when to kind of slow down versus they mention a bunch of dates that don't even show up in the question. You don't really have to worry about that. So that's kind of the nice thing about those passages that you can figure out which dates or which who is going to be mentioned and asked about later. So you can really focus in on those uh, specific points in that paragraph. And the best thing to do with that is actually do a bunch of practice. Like I know I just went on Jack Weston or wherever you're doing your third party passages from. Uh, just choose the boring topic, like the most boring topic. You want to practice doing them because boring passages will come up on your MCAT and you want to make sure that you can tackle them before you actually do it on the real MCAT. So you want to have that practice and build that stamina and mindset.
And I also have a question. Sometimes when we are doing the third party practice passage, and for example, today's we doing the dance and movement passage. I actually don't disagree with question 2 and question 5. And I want to know where do we draw the line between like, oh, we see this question is not very representative, and where do we kind of force to modify our thought when doing the
Yeah.
third party passage?
Huh?
Yeah. So,
Oh, that's the last thing.
sorry, hold on.
Is that the last thing?
Okay. I think you definitely have to be careful with third party passages. Just make sure that if you're missing reading comprehension questions, those are probably something that you can work on. But if it's more on inference, that's probably just because the third party passages aren't the best at making the questions like the double AMC. So you can kind of take those with a grain of salt, but try to understand the explanations and try to really figure out why they said that. And if you can think about it in a different way, you can also email me any passage questions and we can try to figure it out as well. Or you have our Slack. You can also send in questions there. Our tutors are on there as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So what did you guys think of this passage, the dance and movement one? Was it difficult? Easy? I think, I don't know why something is highlighted, but let me see if I can unhighlight that. Okay, yeah, so some of the questions were tricky. Great. Okay, perfect. So we'll get started then. What did you guys take away from the first paragraph? What did you guys highlight? So feel free to either unmute yourself or just type it in the chat. What you highlighted, what you thought was important in the first paragraph.
For me, I saw that the first paragraph was kind of setting up background information for the rest of the passage. I did highlight the sentence, I think it's the second sentence, that says that audience experiences of dance can therefore be conceptualized in terms of responses to movement, most prominently in terms of, yeah, that sentence.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so we have some background information about dance and how it's a movement. We have some person called Anne Daly. Okay, sorry, before I do that, I just want to make sure that we read through the questions. So the basis of the second paragraph, one can reasonably infer from John Martin's claims, which of the relationships is most likely the relationship of dancers to their audiences. Passage suggests which of the following explanations for dance performances the audience do not appreciate. Why are dance performances that involve moves that audience members do not feel capable of emulating still enjoyable? Which of the following approaches to spectatorship does the author support? The word kinesthetic is used in the sense of, and based on the fourth paragraph, which of the statements regarding being an ideal dance audience would the author be most likely to agree? Okay, perfect. So remember the kinesthetic word that came up in the first paragraph? Kinesthetic is a moving art. Okay, great. So what is the one word summary of paragraph 1?
Kinesthetic.
Okay. Moving on, paragraph 2. Oh, did I thought I unhighlighted everything. Okay, paragraph 2, what did you guys highlight? So we have these two terms. And we have the dance critic, John Martin, that was asked about in one of the questions. And then modern dance was interested in emotional experiences.
Connection between movements and emotional states.
Okay, perfect. Connection between movements, emotional states. The modern dancer, instead of employing the cumulative sources of academic tradition, cuts through directly to the source of all dancing. Strong link between emotion and movement. Okay, so what do you guys think about this second paragraph? What is it talking about? So we have mentioned the modern dancer, and we have something about emotion and dancing. So I think those are two key take points from that paragraph. What about paragraph 3? What was important? Okay, inner mimicry?
I highlighted Martin, therefore advised,
Okay,
because I feel like that sentence is, could help me answer a question later.
yeah, perfect. So why do audiences like a dance? Because they can imagine the feeling. We had a question on audiences, so that's probably important. The ideal spectator. Okay, perfect. What is the paragraph summary for that? Yeah, so the audience is something that we learn about here. That's a good summary word. Okay, moving on. Paragraph 4. Thank you guys for participating. That really helps just to learn and make the session interactive. So they're imagining, so in a recent survey of dance viewers, they imagined themselves dancing. And then we have an example of someone, Moira. She had experience as a dancer. And then you can, it's a quote by her that you can put yourself there, you can think in your head. We have another example. This person also had dance training and taught dance. And then Rosemary is another example. So these responses are striking, and it's showing an example of the mimicry and other concepts of John Martin. What did you guys think of the paragraph summary? So what was important in that paragraph? That if we needed to come back, we could try to remember what it was about. Yeah, so most of this paragraph was about imagining themselves dancing. So kind of, so they kind of had some experience with it, and they had, I would just say that inner mimicry was important here. Okay, last paragraph. So whenever they mention however, that's usually really important. It's not just sympathy. So they were imagining the movement. And then they say that it was impossible. So this person, Tony's never been to a ballet. He said he appreciated that they would put a lot of hard work, and he couldn't imagine doing that. So there's a sense of being unable to execute dance movements, and it can be pleasurable and exciting. So that's kind of like a summary of why people, yeah, what's the reward for someone who can't dance? Exactly. So we can just write, what was the other reason of getting reward and pleasure from dance? Okay, perfect. So just reading this, we kind of see the flow of the passage that in the beginning we talked about the kinesthetic movement and introduced modern dancers and how emotion plays a role in dancing. And the audience, we also introduced the audience and how they are able to relate. And we ended by that there are other things that we can get from watching dance. So moving on to the questions, what did you guys get for question 7? Based on the 4th paragraph, which of the following statements regarding being an ideal dance audience would the author be most likely to agree with? So the 4th paragraph, we talked about the inner mimicry. We can even go back and just read the few highlights we did. They're imagining themselves dancing. We had experience of dancing, training, and teaching dance. So we kind of want something that has to do with that. And yeah, C is the best answer. That shows someone who has dance experience, because that relates best to the paragraph summary and the question. Does that make sense? Because we didn't talk about studying dancing. We didn't really talk about retiring. Well, we talked about it in one of the examples, but it's not why they appreciate dance. And the kinesthetic, this is not in paragraph form. Okay, number 6. Why did we use the word kinesthetic? What does it mean in paragraph 1? Yeah, perfect. So it says kinesthetic, that is a moving art. So the best answer would be C. Yeah, makes sense. We didn't talk about emotional impact. C is better than B because it's really talking about moving, and we didn't mention beautiful. Okay, number 5. Yeah. Okay. Okay, this is where we have to be careful, and I know a lot of you guys mentioned that 5 was tricky. So which of the following approaches to spectatorship does the author most support? So spectatorships is where they were imagining themselves dancing, right? So that was mostly paragraph 4 and 5. So let me just read this again. So they're imagining themselves doing the movement, but that it would be impossible. So they are trying to relate to the dancers by imagining, but they also realize that it would be impossible. It's a lot of hard work, and you can't imagine twisting my body into what they were doing. So that's kind of why it's exciting for spectators. So this is where we have to be careful. So identification is okay. They're identifying with the dance. We can keep that. Collaborative, we didn't really talk about interacting with others. So, oh, that can go out. Theoretical is also not theoretical. We're not making a theory or anything. We're just imagining. Emulation. Okay, so between A and D. So to emulate, that means you're copying. But here we say, you know, I couldn't imagine twisting mine into a sense of being unable to execute dance moves. So you're trying to imagine, but you can't imagine doing what they were doing. Like you can't twist your body into shapes like that. It's a lot of hard work. You're not able to execute those dance moves, but it's still exciting for them to watch it. So that is why identification is better, because they can relate and try to imagine, but they can't actually copy. So emulation is saying that they would copy.
Can I interject V?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, please, if anyone has another explanation.
Yeah, can we just call this a throwaway question? Because over 60% answered C, or not over, close to 60%. And as Brian is saying as well, when we think of, I was thinking about 3, but
Yeah.
it literally says the ideal spectator would respond kinesthetically, experiencing the dance through his or own sense of movement and postural change, and this would trigger a corresponding emotional impact. So
Yeah, so let's keep going, and when we get to that question, we can go over it. But yeah, some questions are going to be tricky, and since it's a third passage party, I definitely agree. If a lot of people got it wrong, yeah, that can be a little weird. So we can toss this question away. So just be aware of third party passages. The reasoning can be weird sometimes. Like they try to trick you, and the double AMC really doesn't try to do that, but you just have to understand their logic. So I think third party passages sometimes aren't able to convey that correctly. So it's definitely okay if we skip this question.
thank
Is
you. And
everyone-
sorry, I meant to say paragraph 3, not just 3. I can assume why you thought I was thinking of a question.
Oh,
but I
okay,
just,
yeah. What
yeah,
about?
no, sorry. But
No
thank
worries. Okay. Anyone have any other input before we move on? Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't see how many people missed the question. Okay. Number 4. Why are dance performances that involve moves that audiences do not feel capable of emulating still enjoyable? Okay. Yeah, so this was definitely in paragraph 5 because we talked about not being able to copy them, but they're still enjoyable. So let's go back to that paragraph, what we highlighted. So they were imagining the movement is impossible. They appreciate the fact it's putting a lot of hard work. So, so something like that along those lines. Okay, let's go through the answer choices. Okay, people are inherently impressed by those who can do what most cannot. Okay. We can keep that. Even impossible moves can contain emotional content that audiences can connect with. We didn't really talk about that in that paragraph. Audience members can imagine how much work it takes to do what the dancers do. Yeah, that is definitely mentioned in the passage, is definitely there. So this is probably a good answer choice. Difficult or seemingly impossible dance moves are usually beautiful. Okay, yeah, this is also not what the audience members are feeling when they see those dance moves, because I think it's most likely the hard work one, just because it's mentioned straight in that paragraph and we have a concrete example. So whenever you do have concrete examples, you want those to kind of lead you to the answer. And you don't want to make another inference that, because A and D are most likely implying other things that are not mentioned in the passage specifically, but C is definitely mentioned in the passage. And that is what it's saying in the last paragraph. Brian,
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
But when I understand that C is it should be an answer because they directly mention the work, like they put a lot of hard work. But I felt the overall summary of the last paragraph and also the ending sentence is more suggesting to like there somebody, if somebody cannot do this, but they can still like receive the pleasure and like being exciting as the spectator.
Yeah, I think that's more out of, yeah, someone mentioned inherently should deter you from that answer is too strong of an option. Yeah, that too is another thing that you can work with. Also, I think just because it says pleasurable and exciting, you can't really say that they're impressed by it. Like, people are inherently impressed by those who can do what most cannot. I think it's more that it's a lot of work, so they find it more enjoyable. If anyone has any other input on that question, please feel free to go ahead and comment about that. What do you guys think between A and C? Okay, great. Okay, number 3. The passage suggests which of the following explanations for dance performances the audience do not appreciate. Okay, so the audiences appreciate a lot of the dance that they can imagine, and yeah, so if they can't imagine it, then they probably won't appreciate that much. So B is probably the best answer. It's not difficult that is mentioned that they still appreciate it in the last paragraph that goes against the idea. We didn't really talk about the beat of the music or the emotional sadness that would make them appreciate it. So just by elimination, B would be the best answer. Okay, number 2. Yeah, I can see why this was tricky, and definitely analogies in third-party passages are not great. So this is another question that we'll probably kind of ignore, just because the analogy here, I remember going through it, like, it's really difficult to really think through this one. So what did you guys say for number 2? I think you put B. Okay. This analogy is really difficult. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't really like this question just because they set up the whole thing. So dancers and audiences, the relationship between them was that audiences like the dances because they can imagine, right? The movement and doing that. So we kind of want something that imagines and copies, right? Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of, does someone want to explain the swim teachers and their students? Because I'm a little confused too, like how they're copying, I guess. Maybe it's because I'm not a swimmer. But yeah, this is really difficult. I don't really understand the analogies here that much and how they have to do with the copying. So I agree we can toss this question out if only around 30% got it right. I guess we could do process of elimination, where I think A would be off because you're kind of controlling the puppeteers. Movie actors and their audiences. Okay. Audience is more likely to imagine the actor. Yeah, I think this might be reversed because, like, we don't really imagine the movie actors, right? Like, we can relate to them, I agree. I don't know if we,
I
yeah.
think for me, I got it. 1, 2, the third paragraph where it says audience is like a dance because they can imagine the feeling they would have while doing it. And so actors like literally is to portray this sort of story that you can feel for the characters. That's literally what a good plot line is. You have to feel for the characters and imagine
Yeah.
yourself. Versus like swim teachers and their students, it's very there's no connection there, right? We're looking for that emotion. We're looking for that.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that we were agreeing with B rather than D.
Yeah, I don't understand D really, like why the emotion aspect is missing there. So we can go ahead and move on. I don't want to waste our time on a bad written question. So don't worry about this one, okay? Just be wary of analogy questions. Those can be really tricky from third-party passages, but when you do get to the double AMC material, really understand their logic about their analogies. Okay, last question. I think this one is pretty straightforward. The second paragraph, we mentioned that the modern dancers, instead of going to the academic tradition, they cut through directly. So pre-modern dancers were probably academically influenced. Yes. Does that make sense? In the second paragraph, that he really said it. He argued that the modern dancer, instead of employing academic tradition, you went directly to the source of dancing. So we can infer that the pre-modern dancers were academically influenced from that. Okay, great. We're going to do this passage now. I'll give you guys 10 minutes to do it. And yes, we'll go from there then. So let me know when you guys are ready and I'll start the timer. Okay, you guys can go ahead and start. Let me know in the chat when you're done. Okay, what did you guys think of this passage?
It wasn't too bad, but there were a few things that had me kind of confused.
Okay, yeah, this can be tricky, and someone mentioned they were biased. Yeah, so we definitely learned about Darwin and natural selection, so we definitely have to keep that off on the other side while reading this passage. Okay, so let's dive into it. What did you guys highlight in paragraph 1? Or I guess, sorry, let me read the questions again. Which of the following occupations are creative? So suppose it was discovered that animals' subconscious preferences for how they want their offspring to look and act directly affected what traits their offspring actually inherited. Okay. One can conclude that one would inherit from one's parents. Wow, these are a mouthful. It is reasonable to conclude that an individual's characteristics are affected by, and Darwin differed from other biologists because what? Okay. So we have his theory is more than just natural selection. It was accepted. What Darwin did was that he grasped that this mechanism could be inverted and then converted into the primary cause of evolutionary change. Okay, and he did it in his radical way, yeah. So what can we summarize here? Paragraph 1. So basically, everyone accepted natural selection. Yeah, so I'm gonna just say natural selection. Causes evolution. Yeah, that's basically what Darwin said. Evolution, that's Darwin's idea. Okay, moving on, paragraph 2. So everyone said natural selection plays a negative role in eliminating the unfit and getting rid of bad traits, so only good traits are passed down. That's what everyone accepted. But we must recognize that Darwin's key claim was that natural selection is the force, yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of diving again into that first topic that we mentioned, so it's explaining that more. That is evolutionary change. Okay, paragraph 3. Okay. So now we're saying we lost this distinction. And anyone who's read that knows that this argument inspired, no argument inspired more discussion than Darwin's claim that natural selection is positive and the primary cause of change. And this set the debate. So we're kind of seeing a shift now. So what can we write in our summary here? Anyone? Yeah, so before we said natural selection was positive, and that is lost. Yeah, so we want to keep these really short, and the only person that has to understand them is you. So make sure you understand what you're writing. Okay. Paragraph 4. So now we're saying they didn't deny it. But they said that natural selection could only eliminate the unfit. And it's not natural selection that plays a positive role, it's something else. And then we have another person who Darwin helped convince that evolution occurs, but he didn't accept the mechanism of natural selection. And he became stuck on the issue of creativity. We have an example of the Hindu triad. They mentioned some gods and how it's kind of related to that. They said mutation spurred evolution. Okay, so paragraph 4. What do you guys think is a good summary for that? Yeah, perfect. So mutation is what leads to evolution is the idea of this paragraph. So this is contrary to what Darwin thinks. Okay, we can understand the trouble that Darwin's contemporaries experienced in comprehending how selection could work as a creative force. Natural selection makes nothing. It can only choose. So how then can selection be conceived as progressive, creative, or positive? So we have some questions here. Why was Darwin saying that? So what is a good summary? Yeah, so that's the central paradox. Good catch. So what is the summary of this paragraph? So we can just say that we have some questions. And yeah, natural selection did not make anything. Okay, paragraph 6. Darwin admits that natural selection made nothing, but that it was creative if it's going to be the primary cause of evolutionary change. Even if mutations are involved, something must decide what mutations flourish. And natural selection, again, is doing the evolutionary change. So we're going back to Darwin's idea that he accepts that natural selection is nothing, but he says there has to be a creative part. And what decides that creative part is natural selection. That's what he is trying to say. And natural selection chooses the mutation. Okay, good job, guys. Okay, last paragraph. So only after a long time with gradual variation adding up in a population, what else but natural selection could be called creative? So that's what Darwin is saying. So as long as variation supplies the raw material, as long as change happens in a gradual manner, as long as the reproductive advantages provide the change, then natural selection, again, is the cause of evolutionary modification. This is what Darwin is saying, basically. So we need to have variation in a gradual manner, reproductive advantages. So those are the things that happen, but then natural selection is the directional cause. That's what is the main idea of that paragraph. So natural selection is the directional cause. Perfect. So does that make sense how we kind of went through this passage? Okay, number 5. What did you guys get? The author explains that Darwin differed from other biologists because why? Okay, I'm seeing some A's. Okay, yeah, great. So natural selection primarily eliminates defective mutations. Yeah, so Darwin did not think that natural selection primarily did this. And he said that we needed to think of natural selection as more creative. Yes, so what is the question? Which paragraph can you find the answer for this? Yeah, let's look. So we see the natural selection acts as the creative force. And so we're basically saying that mutations were not, Darwin said the other folks were the one that said mutation. So that's kind of the key play here. Wherever we mention mutations, paragraph 4. So, yeah, so here, mutation spurred evolution. So Darwin did not say that, but he also argued that natural selection was creative, and that's why the mutations got chosen. It wasn't that mutations spurred evolution. So that's why thinking is backwards. So that's why A is the correct answer. We could also do this by process of elimination because Darwin did say there is natural selection. We can argue against that. There is logic. Yes, they both mentioned that, so they both agree with that. Darwin didn't differ from that. He didn't say that natural selection does not produce new genetic material. So those are all things that Darwin agreed with. So just by that, we can do process of elimination. Okay, question 4. It is reasonable to conclude that an individual's characteristics are significantly affected by what? What do you guys think? Yeah, so the basis of this paragraph was that mutations, natural selection selects from mutation. So D is definitely the best answer. Okay, number 3. If the information is correct, what can we conclude from one could inherit what from one's parents? Yeah, so, okay, so what can we inherit from one's parents? Okay. I'm seeing some A's and some B's. Let's go through this. Okay, only mutations that augment desirable traits. Okay. Interesting. We can keep that for now. Mutations that provide reproductive advantages. We can also keep that. That was mentioned somewhere. All of their mutations that negatively affect an individual. Okay, this is too extreme. Just by saying all of their mutations.
Same with A, because it says only.
Yeah. And no mutations not shared by the whole species. And that's also extreme because we didn't mention that the whole species had to share it. So we can eliminate that. Going between A and B, the one that's going to be better is not going to be super extreme. Only mutations that augment desirable traits. That's really extreme by saying we only get the positive ones. But reproductive advantages is mentioned in there, and natural selection was the one. As long as reproductive advantages provide that change, natural selection will cause that evolutionary modification. So you can conclude that you can inherit that because those changes are going to go through. Does that make sense how the other choices were really extreme and why we could eliminate those? Okay. Perfect. Number 2. Brian, for the last question, C, could inherit all of their mutations that negatively affect an individual. It's too extreme. We don't say that you inherit all of, question 2?
Oh, question 2.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. What is everyone's answer for question 2? So we're saying that animals have preferences for how they want their offspring to look and act. That can affect what traits they inherit. So this is going against natural selection because we're saying natural selection is the creative force of evolution, but here we're saying that animals, we can decide for ourselves which we want the offspring to inherit. So that definitely can help us eliminate some things.
But
So
I have a question.
Yeah.
I thought the animals' sexual selection or the sexual preference would just be a type of natural selection. Since if a peacock, like for example, if a peacock prefer to have a bigger, beautiful tail, and if every female want to select the bigger, beautiful tail for the peacock, then eventually they will change the direction for the evolutionary change in trait.
Okay. I think that's going too much into it and applying a lot of out of scope details just because that wasn't mentioned in the passage. So you can't really think about those examples here. So we definitely want to stick to the examples mentioned in the passage, and it's only just natural selection and eliminating the unfit. So stuff like that. If we were to say that their preferences were being inherited, that's not that's challenging the natural selection, what Darwin said, because that's saying something other than natural selection plays into the evolution. Because that doesn't really support the idea that evolution is real or not. If that's what you're saying, that doesn't have to really do with anything about evolution being real. That doesn't also support the claim that natural selection produces nothing. And it doesn't undermine the view of his opponents. So we have to be careful there. So the only choice we're really left with is B, because it would challenge his natural selection finding. We're going against that because we're saying something other than natural selection is the creative force here. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Okay, last question, guys. Which is creative, as Darwin uses the term? Okay, so creative, where did we see that? Okay, so the issue of creativity, and also held that it must be deemed creative right here. Perfect. So if natural selection made nothing but held that it must be deemed creative, it would be construed as a primary cause for imparting direction. Even if mutation is involved, something must decide. So natural selection is choosing between the raw materials and can manufacture evolutionary change. So we're kind of, he's saying natural selection is creative because it's choosing what to do. So we kind of want an option that is being creative by choosing something that's already made. And C is the best answer because an editor is just choosing something that is already made. The paper is usually already written. The editor is just choosing parts of it to edit and keep. So that would be the best answer here. B would go against because the waste management worker, I don't think this mentioned the raw material. So those would be something that people believed was not creative, who Darwin's contemporaries said natural selection was not creative. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, well, okay, sorry for going a little bit over time, but I hope you enjoy this session. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this was my first time joining and I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, thank you. Yeah, and I'll send you guys a post session email, but thank you guys so much for coming today. And I will see you next time. So take care.